She was just a silent cleaner until she entered the forbidden room. The millionaire, consumed by a morbid desire, shouted an order that would seal their fates. But what he never imagined was that she wasn't as innocent as she seemed. If you enjoy stories of love and romance, watch until the end and you won't regret it. Subscribe to this channel and leave your comment saying where you listened to this beautiful story from. We continue. The warm London sun streamed through the gaps in the heavy curtains of Stirlingwood Manor, an oasis of silence and opulence in the Kensington neighbourhood. Ariane Sterling shrugged as the housekeeper, a woman with a stern gaze, showed her the list of tasks for her first day. 22 years old, a life of invisibility, and now this job that promised double the salary of the private homes where she had worked before. Her delicate face and small hands were accustomed to discreet, almost imperceptible movements. She had learned early on that the less she was noticed, the better. This manor has strict rules, girl. You do not clean the master bedroom without supervision. You do not comment on anything you see. You do not enter the East Wing without express authorization. And above all, you do not disturb Mr. Sterling. Ever since his wife. Well, ever since that, he tolerates no noise or intrusion. Ariane nodded, her eyes downcast, the grey uniform a size too large for her frail frame. The housekeeper handed her a bunch of keys and pointed to the corridor leading to the staff quarters. Among her responsibilities was cleaning the private wing, where the late lady of the house's chambers were located, a delicate job that required absolute discretion. And remember, not a word about Mrs. Eliza, not even among the staff. In this house, certain names must not be pronounced. That was how her routine began at Stirlingwood Manor, owned by the man who, at 42, commanded one of the country's largest business groups, but who was rarely seen outside those walls. Victor Sterling, a descendant of Italians who had made their fortune in the textile industry, had become an urban legend after the tragic accident that killed Eliza 2 years earlier. Magazines speculated about his isolation. His closest friends had long given up trying to reach him. Only his aides were allowed to enter and leave with folders of documents and business information. In the first few weeks, Ariane didn't actually see him. She only heard his footsteps in the early hours of the morning, or the sound of the piano playing alone in the library at 3 a.m. The other staff spoke of him in whispers, as if fearing to invoke a spirit. The head butler, Arthur, a 70-year-old man who had served the Sterling family since before Victor's birth, was the only one who entered his quarters daily. He still puts her coffee on the tray every morning, one of the cooks confided to Ariane as they prepared dinner. 2 cups. As if she's going to come down at any moment. Ariane didn't respond, but she stored that information like a small treasure. Since childhood, she had a habit of collecting facts about others' lives. Raised by her mother, Dorothy, a hospital canteen worker, Ariane had spent her childhood afternoons in the staff room, silently observing the nurses and doctors, trying to guess their stories. While her mother cleaned coffee cups and arranged patient meal trays, the wide-eyed, curious girl absorbed the fragments of life that fell around her. Conversations about impossible loves, complicated family dynamics, postponed dreams. Perhaps that's why, when she first found the collection of old magazines stored in a box in the manor's cleaning closet, she felt that strange recognition. They were copies of society magazines, with Eliza Sterling gracing the covers. The beautiful socialite with dark hair and almond-shaped eyes smiled under powerful flashes. But Ariane, accustomed to deciphering expressions, saw beyond that automatic smile. She saw the same loneliness she herself carried. It was on a rainy June afternoon that the manor changed for Ariane. The London sky unleashed a fierce storm, and all the staff were busy checking for leaks and protecting antique furniture. The East Wing, normally off-limits, was left unsupervised, and Ariane, who knew every inch of the house she meticulously cleaned every day, had the master key the housekeeper had entrusted her with. It wasn't a conscious decision. It was an impulse, like when someone touches a scar just to feel its texture. Her steps led her down the corridor of walls, adorned with French wallpaper, to the majestic door of the master bedroom. Her hands turned the key without her brain fully processing what she was doing. The room was a museum, the king-size bed covered by a pearl silk bedspread, untouched as if no one had touched it in years. Paintings of Tuscan landscapes on the walls. A sideboard with dozens of photo frames showing the Sterling couple on trips around the world. Santorini, New York, Paris, Tokyo. And more impressive than anything, that double-carved oak door that Ariane knew led to Eliza's personal walk-in closet. The first mistake was entering. The second was breathing in that perfumed air, as if time had been frozen. The closet was the size of a small apartment, with rows upon rows of clothes organized by color, by season, by designer. Shoes lined up on illuminated shelves, jewelry in glass cases, perfumes on silver trays, and in the center, like an art installation, a mannequin displaying what appeared to be a minimalist wedding dress, of a white so pure it almost hurt her eyes. Ariane approached without realizing she had held her breath. Her fingers touched the fabric lightly, as one would a sacred relic. It was heavy, elaborate, with tiny hand-embroidered pearls that formed a delicate pattern along the hem. "It's not a wedding dress," a voice said behind her, making her freeze. It was the dress she was going to wear for our 10th anniversary. She never got to wear it. Victor Sterling stood in the doorway, his dark eyes fixed on Ariane with an intensity that made her instinctively recoil. He was taller than he appeared in photos, his broad shoulders beneath his tailored suit, his face marked by a 3-day stubble and deep circles under his eyes. He didn't seem angry. He seemed fascinated. "I'm sorry, sir. I shouldn't be here. Ariane tried to explain, but the words died in her throat. "You look like her," he said, taking a step forward. "Not physically." Eliza was blonde, taller, but there's something in your gaze. A familiar sadness. Ariane felt her heart pound. She didn't know if she should run, apologize again, or simply accept the dismissal that would surely come. Instead, she stood paralyzed, as Victor approached and touched the dress with the same reverence she had shown moments earlier. "Wear it," he ordered, his voice low, almost a whisper. "Sir?" "The dress, wear it. I want to see how it looks." It wasn't a request. It was an order. And Ariane, trained to obey since forever, couldn't find the strength in herself to refuse. With trembling hands, she delicately picked up the dress and looked around, searching for a place to change. "Right here," Victor said, sitting in an armchair in the corner of the closet, and pouring himself a shot of whiskey from a bottle Ariane hadn't noticed before. "Don't worry. There's nothing I haven't seen before." That was the moment everything changed. The moment Ariane should have refused, should have left, should have resigned. But there was something hypnotic about that man, about that palpable pain that emanated from him in waves. And, perhaps more importantly, there was something within her that for the first time felt seen. With trembling fingers, Ariane began to unbutton her grey uniform. Her tanned skin contrasted with the whiteness of the dress she held against her chest. She didn't look at Victor as she undressed, but she could feel the weight of his gaze. When she finally slipped the dress over her body, a shiver ran down her spine. It was as if the fabric had a memory of its own, as if it carried the ghost of the woman who should have worn it. "Turn around," Victor ordered, his voice hoarse. Ariane obeyed. The dress was fitted at the bust and waist, then flared into a flowing skirt. It was big in some places, tight in others, but that didn't seem to matter. What mattered was the transformation happening in Victor's eyes, the recognition, the pain, the desire. "Perfect," he murmured, rising and approaching. "Almost perfect." His fingers lightly touched Ariane's face, tracing the curve of her jawline, descending her neck to the exposed décolletage of the dress. It was an intimate yet clinical touch, like a sculptor assessing his creation. And then, without warning, he pulled away abruptly. "Take it all off." "That's an order." The change in his tone was so sudden that Ariane took a step back. Victor's expression had hardened, as if he had awakened from a trance. "I'm sorry, sir. I shouldn't have—" "Take off the dress," he repeated, turning his back. "Then come to my office. We need to talk." Ariane carefully took off the dress, her hands still trembling. She quickly put on her uniform and returned the garment to the mannequin, trying to reproduce exactly how it was before. When she finished, Victor had already left. On her way to the office, she tried to control the panic. She would be fired, certainly. She would lose the job that paid for her mother's treatment, who was battling cancer at the hospital, where she had previously worked. She would return to the tiny apartment on the outskirts of London, to overdue bills, to the daily struggle for survival. When she knocked on the office door, resignation was already in her eyes. But what she found on the other side was not dismissal. "Enter," Victor said, now seated behind a dark wooden desk, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. "Close the door." Ariane obeyed, staying close to the exit like a cornered animal ready to flee. "Do you have family?" he asked, without raising his eyes from the papers in front of him. "Only my mother, sir. She's ill. Address? East End, Willow Creek." Victor made some notes. "As of tomorrow, you will no longer work as a cleaner in this house," he said, finally looking her in the eyes. "I am offering another position." Ariane felt her legs weaken. "What position, sir?" "A personal assistant. The salary will be 5 times higher. You will have a room in the West Wing, overlooking the gardens. Your job will be to accompany me to social engagements when necessary. Learn etiquette, French, perhaps a little piano. In return, I demand absolute discretion. Nothing that happens within these walls can be commented on, not even to your mother." "But why?" The question escaped before she could contain it. Victor leaned forward, his eyes fixed on hers. "Because when I saw you in that dress, I realized you can help me. Or I you. I haven't decided yet." There was something disturbing about the proposal, something that made Ariane shiver internally. But there was also an opportunity she would never have otherwise. "And my mother? She will be transferred to St. Jude's Hospital tomorrow. Full treatment, free of charge. I've already spoken with the medical director." Ariane felt her eyes sting. St. Jude's Hospital was the best in London, known for treating celebrities and businessmen. It was an inaccessible world for people like her. "Why are you doing this for me?" she asked, her voice almost fading. Victor rose and walked to the window, looking out at the immaculate gardens that no one had visited for years. "I'm not doing it for you," he replied without turning around. "I'm doing it for myself, for reasons you don't need to understand now." That night, Ariane was taken to a new room, 3 times larger than the small room where she slept in the staff quarters. There were new clothes in the closet, all her size. In the bathroom, expensive beauty products she only knew from TV commercials. On the bedside table, a contract and a golden pen. The contract spoke of confidentiality, exclusivity, full availability. It spoke of rules, schedules, expectations. It didn't speak of the dress, of the closet, of Victor's strange fixation. But between the lines, Ariane could read what wasn't written. She was being bought. For what, she didn't yet know. When she signed, she felt as if she was signing not just a contract, but a new destiny. The same hands that had dusted expensive furniture now traced her name on a document that transformed her into something she didn't yet fully comprehend. The next morning, a team of professionals appeared at the manor. Hairdressers, makeup artists, personal stylists. Ariane was measured, analyzed, transformed. Her dark brown hair, previously always tied in a simple bun, was treated and styled in soft waves. Her nails, previously short for practicality, were lengthened and painted in a discreet pink shade. Her simple clothes were replaced by elegant pieces in neutral tones, tailored trousers, silk blouses, soft leather shoes. "Mr. Sterling asked us to maintain your essence," the stylist explained as she adjusted a shirt collar. "Nothing too extravagant, discreet elegance." As she was transformed externally, Ariane tried to process what was happening. She remembered the magazines she had found, the photos of Eliza Sterling. She wasn't being transformed into a copy of the deceased. They were too physically different for that, but she was being elevated to the same world, to the same level. When the team finished, Ariane barely recognized herself in the mirror. She was no longer the invisible cleaner. She was an elegant woman who could easily pass for an executive or socialite. Only her eyes remained the same, large, dark, full of unanswered questions. Victor awaited her in the winter garden, a glass and metal structure where rare orchids were cultivated. When he saw her, there was a gleam of satisfaction in his gaze. "Much better," he said, indicating the chair in front of him. "Sit down, let's have coffee." The following days were a whirlwind of new lessons and rules. An etiquette teacher appeared every morning to teach Ariane how to conduct herself at formal dinners, to use the correct cutlery, to converse on appropriate topics. In the afternoon, a French teacher introduced her to the language that, according to Victor, every cultured person should master. At the end of the day, there were piano lessons in the Grand Hall. Victor rarely participated in these activities, but he was always present like a shadow, observing from afar. Sometimes he corrected something Ariane did. Other times he just watched in silence, with that unfathomable expression she still couldn't decipher. In the evening, they dined together in the immense dining hall, served by the butler Arthur, who looked at Ariane with an expression that mixed curiosity and suspicion. The conversation was minimal. Victor asked occasional questions about her progress, but avoided personal topics. He never mentioned Eliza or the day in the closet, until 2 weeks after her transformation. During dinner, Victor finally broke the silence on the subject that hung between them. "You want to know why you're here?" he said, not as a question but as a statement. "Why I chose you." Ariane slowly lowered her cutlery. "Yes, sir." "Don't call me sir when we're alone." "My name is Victor." She nodded, uncomfortable with the implied intimacy. "Eliza died 2 years, 3 months, and 17 days ago," he continued, pouring himself more wine. "Her car went off the road in the Lake District, returning from a trip to Brighton. It plunged 100 meters. When they found the vehicle, she was still alive, but with severe internal injuries. She died on the way to the hospital." Ariane felt a lump in her throat. She knew the story from the newspapers, but hearing it from Victor's mouth made everything more real, more brutal. "I'm sorry." "Don't be," he cut in dryly. "Everyone is sorry. No one truly cares." There was a heavy silence before he continued. "The night before the accident, we had a terrible fight. She wanted to leave me. Said our marriage was a prison, that I was suffocating her. Said she had secrets I would never understand." His eyes were fixed on some distant point, as if reliving that moment. "I loved her more than anything in this world, more than my own life, and she wanted to leave me. So I did what any desperate man would do. I begged. I humbled myself. I promised to change. In the end, she agreed to think about it during the trip." Victor took a long sip of wine. "The next day I received the call about the accident. When I arrived at the scene, the paramedics were already taking her away. She opened her eyes one last time, looked at me, and said something I couldn't hear. And then she was gone." A solitary tear ran down Victor's scarred face. He wiped it away with a sharp movement, as if annoyed by his own emotion. "Since then, I've been trying to understand what she wanted to tell me. What the secret was. Why our life together wasn't enough for her." Ariane felt a shiver run through her body. She was beginning to understand the role she was being called to play. "And what do I have to do with this?" Victor finally looked directly at her, his dark eyes as piercing as a predator's. "You will help me find out. You will enter her world, wear her things, frequent her places, and perhaps find what I have been looking for so long. You want me to be her?" "No," he replied, rising and walking to stand behind Ariane's chair. His fingers lightly touched her shoulders, causing her an involuntary shiver. "I want you to be yourself, but in her world. I want you to see what she saw, to feel what she felt, and to tell me what you find." His fingers traced up Ariane's neck to her face, gently turning it so she looked at him. "Can I trust you with this, Ariane?" There was a hypnotic power in his words, in his touch. Ariane felt torn between fear and a strange excitement. Part of her wanted to flee that manor, that man, that disturbing game. Another part, however, a part she barely recognized in herself, was curious, fascinated. The invisible finally being seen, the insignificant finally having importance. "Yes," she replied, almost in a whisper. "You can trust me." Victor smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Good. Tomorrow we begin for real." And so, in that isolated manor in Kensington, as the rain continued to fall over London, Ariane felt that she had made a pact with something greater and more dangerous than she could imagine. An agreement that would transform her forever, if she survived it. Because that night, as she tried to sleep in the luxurious room that was now hers, she had the uneasy feeling of not being alone. As if invisible eyes were watching her through the walls, as if the house itself breathed around her, full of secrets waiting to be discovered. And perhaps most disturbing, for the first time in her life of shadows and silences, Ariane no longer wanted to be invisible. She wanted to discover what lay beyond the mirror into which Victor Sterling had pushed her, even if it meant losing herself in the process. October arrived with its humid warmth in London, causing the estate gardens to burst into vibrant colours. Ariane observed the flowers from her room in the West Wing, pensive. 3 months had passed since that night she accepted the strange agreement with Victor, and her life had transformed into something she never could have imagined. Every morning, a new outfit awaited her, carefully chosen to appear casual. But Ariane knew that nothing in that house was by chance. Her hair now sported a cut that elegantly framed her face. Her hands were soft, her nails always impeccable. Her body, previously curved by the habit of trying to disappear, now moved with a newly acquired grace, after weeks of posture lessons. "You're almost ready," Victor said that morning during breakfast, observing her over the cup of unsweetened black coffee he always drank. "It's time to leave these walls." Ariane felt a pang in her stomach. In recent weeks, her routine had been reduced to lessons, silent dinners with Victor, and long hours exploring Eliza's quarters, her carefully edited diaries, her clothes, her personal belongings. It was like assembling a puzzle where crucial pieces were missing. "Leave?" she asked, keeping her voice controlled as she had learned. "Yes, there's a charity event next week. The Orchid Ball, it was Eliza's favorite." The name hung heavy in the air between them. In recent months, Victor mentioned Eliza with increasing frequency, but always in a restrained, clinical manner. He never spoke of feelings, only facts. It was her favorite restaurant, the author she liked most, the music that made her smile. "Are we going together?" Ariane asked, though she already knew the answer. "Yes, it will be your first public appearance as my companion." The hesitation did not go unnoticed. What was she, after all? Not an employee, not a friend, certainly not a lover. Although there were moments, glances, accidental touches that suggested something more complex growing between them. "What should I expect?" she asked, keeping her eyes fixed on the teacup in front of her. "Curiosity, gossip, perhaps some hostility." Victor paused, studying her face. "These are people who knew Eliza, who know me. They won't understand. They don't need to understand." That afternoon, a stylist came to the manor with several dress options for the event. Ariane tried them on one by one, while Victor observed from an armchair in the corner, his eyes critical, his expression impenetrable. It was when she came out wearing an emerald green dress that something changed in his gaze. "That one," he said, rising and approaching. "It's perfect." The dress was elegant and relatively simple at first glance, but rich in detail. Small embroidered crystals formed subtle patterns along the fabric, catching the light with every movement. The back neckline plunged almost to the waistline, revealing Ariane's tanned skin. "Eliza never wore green," Victor commented, circling around her slowly. "She said it was a color that didn't suit her." "On you—" He stopped, his eyes meeting Ariane's in the mirror. "On you. It's as if the color was made for your skin." It was the first time he had praised her directly, without comparison to Eliza. Something strange happened inside Ariane at that moment, a warmth that started in her chest and spread throughout her body. It wasn't just the compliment. It was the recognition. It was being seen as herself, not as a substitute. "Thank you," she replied, and her voice came out softer than she intended. On the night of the ball, the tension in the manor was palpable. The staff observed Ariane with expressions ranging from admiration to concern. Only Stella, the elderly mute woman who cared for the East Wing, approached her as she was getting ready and placed something in her hand, a small sapphire brooch. "Was it Eliza's?" Ariane asked, confused. Stella shook her head negatively and made gestures that Ariane didn't fully comprehend. She seemed to want to say that the brooch was a personal gift, something to protect her. Before she could ask more, the old employee disappeared silently, as she always did. The journey to the hotel where the event would take place was silent. Victor, immaculate in his tuxedo, kept his eyes on the car window, lost in thought. Ariane felt her heart pounding in her chest. For months she had lived isolated in that manner, learning to become someone she wasn't. Now, she would be introduced to Eliza's world, a world of which she only knew fragments through photos, diaries and carefully filtered stories. "Remember," Victor said finally as the car approached the venue, "you owe no explanations to anyone. If they ask about our relationship, smile and deflect the conversation. If they insist, say we are friends. Nothing more." "And is that what we are?" Ariane asked, an unexpected courage rising within her. "Friends?" Victor looked at her for a long time, his dark eyes indecipherable. "We are more complex than that," he replied finally. "You know that." The Orchid Ball was one of the most prestigious events on London's social calendar. Held annually at the luxurious Savoy Hotel, it gathered the country's business and artistic elite, around a charitable cause, this year the construction of a new pediatric wing at a public hospital. The ballroom was decorated with orchids of all colors and sizes, soft lights creating an atmosphere of intimate elegance. When Ariane entered arm in arm with Victor Sterling, the buzz was immediate. Conversations were interrupted, gazes turned towards them, some discreet, others less so. She felt the weight of those gazes, the curiosity, the judgment. "Breathe," Victor murmured, guiding her through the ballroom. "You belong in this place as much as any of them." It was a lie, of course. Ariane knew that. Beneath the designer dress and elegant hairstyle, she was still the canteen worker's daughter, the girl who grew up counting coins for the bus. But she had learned to wear a mask, just like everyone in that ballroom. The first group that approached them consisted of 3 couples, executives from partner companies of the Sterling Group and their wives. The shock on their faces at seeing Victor was quickly disguised by polite smiles. "Victor! What a wonderful surprise to see you here," exclaimed one of the women, a blonde in her 50s, kissing him on the cheek. "It's been so long." "2 years, Helen," he replied with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Since the funeral." The discomfort was immediate. Helen shot a quick glance at Ariane, then back at Victor. "And who is your charming companion?" "This is Ariane Sterling. Ariane, meet Helen and Robert Miller, and Charles and Patricia Alden, and of course, Gustav and Lucy Perry." Ariane smiled and greeted everyone with the elegance she had practiced for weeks. "Ariane works with me," Victor said, without elaborating. "A special collaboration." The exchanged glances between the couples said it all. They immediately assumed she was Victor's mistress, perhaps even the reason for his social reappearance. "And how did you meet?" asked Patricia, a sharp-eyed brunette. "At my house," Victor replied dryly, ending the subject. "Helen, I heard your son is graduating from Oxford. You must be proud." The change of subject was abrupt but effective. Soon the conversation flowed on safe topics, and Ariane could breathe again. During the next 2 hours, the scene repeated itself several times. Introductions, politely intrusive questions, strategic changes of subject by Victor. Ariane observed everything carefully, registering names, alliances, power dynamics. This was Eliza's world, and each conversation revealed a little more about the woman she was, in a way. Replacing. It was during a moment when Victor stepped away to speak with a politician that a woman approached Ariane. She was older, perhaps in her 60s, elegant in a classic black dress, her grey hair perfectly styled in a bun. "You're brave," the woman said without introduction. "Or reckless, I haven't decided yet." "Pardon?" Entering his game. Stepping into her shoes. "Say it's dangerous, you know." Ariane felt a shiver run down her spine. "I don't know what you're talking about." The woman smiled, a sad, knowing smile. "I'm Celeste Miller. I was Eliza's psychiatrist." The shock must have been visible on Ariane's face because the woman continued. "Yes, he didn't mention that, did he? Eliza was in therapy for the last 6 months before her death. She was terrified." "Why?" "That would be breaking professional confidentiality, even after death," Celeste replied, taking a sip of champagne. "But I can tell you she was planning to leave him. And she was afraid of the consequences." Before Ariane could ask more, Victor returned, his face hardening upon seeing who she was talking to. "Dr. Miller, how unexpected." "I always come to the orchid ball, Victor. It was important to Eliza, as you well know." The tension between them was almost palpable. Victor placed his hand on Ariane's back, a touch that seemed both protective and possessive. "Ariane, we need to greet the ambassador before we leave." "Of course," she replied automatically, but her eyes remained on Celeste. "It was a pleasure to meet you." "Ariane," the psychiatrist said, discreetly handing her a card. "If you need to talk about anything." In the car returning to the manor, the silence was oppressive. Ariane could feel the anger emanating from Victor, an almost physical presence in the confined space of the vehicle. "What did she tell you?" he asked finally, his voice controlled but with an underlying tremor. "She introduced herself as Eliza's psychiatrist." "And?" "She said Eliza was planning to leave you. That she was afraid." Victor let out a bitter laugh. "Celeste Miller was more than Eliza's psychiatrist. She was her confidant, her accomplice. She fed her paranoia, her irrational fears." "What fears?" He turned to face her, his dark eyes reflecting the city lights passing by the window. Eliza believed I controlled every aspect of her life, that I monitored her, manipulated the people around her. She thought I was dangerous. The way he said the last word made Ariane shiver. And was it true? The question hung between them like a living thing. Victor looked away, returning to contemplate the urban landscape. I loved her. I would do anything for her. Anything to protect her, including from herself. Ariane felt a lump forming in her throat. There was something in the way he spoke, something between the lines that made her uncomfortable. Was she really going to leave you? Yes, he admitted after a long silence. The morning of the accident, she called saying she wouldn't be returning home. That she had found evidence of what I was doing. That she was going to expose me. Expose you for what? Victor didn't answer. He just closed his eyes, as if the memory was too painful. When they arrived at the manor, he got out of the car without waiting for her and walked quickly into the house. Ariane followed him, struggling against the discomfort of her high heels on the garden's stone path. When she entered, she found him at the library bar, pouring himself a generous shot of whiskey. "Why are you telling me this now?" she asked, stopping at the door. "Because you need to know who you're dealing with," he replied, turning to face her. "Everyone at that party thinks I killed my wife, that I somehow caused the accident, or that it wasn't an accident at all." Ariane felt her blood run cold. "And what do you say to that?" "I say I loved her more than anything, that her death destroyed my life, that I would give anything to have her back." His eyes swept over Ariane slowly, from head to toe, a gaze that made her feel exposed, despite the elegant dress, or at least something that filled the void she left. That night marked a change in their relationship. In the following days, Victor became more distant, colder. The lessons continued, but now there was a new element, frequent visits to the off-limits wing of the manor, where Eliza's most intimate belongings were kept. Not just clothes and jewelry, but documents, notes, a sealed laptop that had never been opened after her death. "I want you to see everything," Victor said, handing Ariane the key to a small room she had never entered before. "Every note, every receipt, every email. I want you to delve into her mind in the last weeks before the accident." "Why?" "Because I need to understand what she discovered. What scared her so much? What made her want to leave me?" There was a vulnerability in his voice that Ariane had never heard before. For a moment, she saw beyond the mask of the powerful businessman, beyond the obsessed widower. She saw a broken man desperate for answers. In the days that followed, Ariane spent hours in that room, meticulously examining Eliza Sterling's life. She discovered a complex woman, educated in Europe, spoke 4 languages, had a master's in art history, was a patron of several cultural institutions. But she also found evidence of depression, isolation, and growing fear. In a notebook hidden behind a false book spine, she found troubling entries. "He's watching me all the time. Yesterday, he mentioned a conversation I had with the gardener, a private conversation when he wasn't even home. How could he know? The mirrors. I'm sure some are fake. I feel eyes in the walls." On another page, Dr. Maxwell confirmed my suspicions about the medication. "They're not just vitamins. It would explain why I feel so confused sometimes, so controlled. I need concrete proof before confronting him." And the last entry, written the day before her death. I found it. The tapes, the recordings, everything. Years of surveillance, not just of me, but of everyone. Staff, friends, business partners. It's sick. It's a crime. Tomorrow I'm going to the police. I can't live like this anymore. Ariane felt her hands tremble as she read these words. What were these tapes? What evidence had Eliza discovered? It was during this investigation that she noticed something strange about the manor's mirrors. Some seemed to have a slightly different depth, a reflection that wasn't exactly as it should be, and at certain angles, when the light hit in a particular way, a small difference in texture could be seen. With growing suspicion, Ariane began to pay more attention to her surroundings. She noticed small details, how Victor sometimes mentioned things she had done or said when she was alone, how certain objects in her room seemed slightly out of place, even if no one had entered, how the feeling of being watched intensified in certain rooms of the house. One night, while Victor was at a rare business meeting outside the manor, Ariane decided to test her theory. She went to the library and, pretending to trip, knocked over a valuable statuette. The piece shattered on the marble floor with a crash. "Damn it," she said aloud. "I hope there aren't any cameras here." Then she left the room and waited. 10 minutes later, her phone, a gift from Victor that she suspected was more than just a phone, rang. "Did something happen in the library?" Victor's voice asked without preamble. "How do you know?" She countered, her heart racing. A brief silence. "Arthur called me. Said he heard a noise. It was a lie. Arthur was in the kitchen on the other side of the manor. He couldn't have heard anything." "I'm fine," she replied, trying to keep her voice calm. "I just knocked something over." "Nothing important. Be more careful, Ariane. Some things in that house are irreplaceable." When she hung up, Ariane was certain she was being watched. Just like Eliza, the manor was a golden cage, where every movement was monitored, every word recorded. The paranoia that had led Eliza to flee was starting to make sense. Even more disturbing was when she began to dream about her. Vivid dreams, where Eliza appeared wearing the same green dress Ariane had worn to the ball, walking through the manor's corridors, always trying to show her something, guide her somewhere. In one particularly disturbing dream, Eliza led her to the garage and pointed to a car covered by a tarp, a silver Porsche that Ariane knew was the accident vehicle, recovered and kept as a macabre relic. The morning after that dream, Ariane woke up determined. She waited until Victor left for a video conference in his office and went to the garage. The Porsche was there exactly as in her dream. With trembling hands, she pulled back the tarp. The car was impeccably restored, without signs of the devastating accident. But there was something different, something that shouldn't have been there. In the passenger seat, an object gleamed in the dim light. The small sapphire brooch Stella had given her on the night of the ball. Confused, Ariane picked up the brooch and examined it. It looked normal, just an antique piece of sentimental jewelry. But when she turned it over, she noticed that the back was strangely heavy, with a mechanism that didn't seem to belong to a simple brooch. She gently pressed it, and the piece opened, revealing a tiny internal compartment. Inside, a small memory card. At that moment, she heard footsteps approaching the garage. Quickly, she closed the brooch, put it in her pocket, and replaced the tarp over the car. When the door opened, she was standing next to some gardening tools, pretending to look for something. "Ariane?" Victor called, his voice echoing in the spacious area. "What are you doing here?" "Looking for some garden shears," she improvised. "I wanted to cut some flowers for my room." Victor observed her with intensity, as if trying to read her thoughts. "The shears are in the tool shed, not the garage." "Oh, I got confused, sorry." He looked around, his eyes lingering briefly on the covered Porsche. "This isn't a place for you, Ariane. There are memories here that I prefer not to disturb." She nodded, trying to appear regretful, while feeling the brooch burn in her pocket like a hot coal. That night, after dinner, Victor surprised Ariane with an announcement. "I need to travel to Edinburgh tomorrow. Government affairs that I cannot resolve remotely. I will return in 3 days." It was the first time since Ariane had arrived at the manor that Victor would spend the night away. She tried to hide the relief she felt. "I understand. Is there anything you need me to do during your absence?" "Just continue your lessons and—" He paused, looking at her intensely. "Don't explore the house beyond the limits we've set. For safety." It was a veiled threat, and both knew it. "Of course," she replied docilely. As soon as Victor left the next morning, Ariane felt a mix of freedom and fear. Freedom from being temporarily free of his watchful presence. Fear of what she might discover. First, she checked her room for cameras or microphones. She found nothing obvious, but that didn't mean they weren't there. She decided to act as if she was being watched all the time. She followed her normal routine during the day: French lessons in the morning, lunch in the winter garden, reading in the library in the afternoon. Only at dusk, when the majority of the staff had already retired, did she go to Eliza's room, carrying an old laptop she had found in storage, one that, she hoped, wasn't connected to the house's security system. In the closet, sitting in the same spot where Victor had first seen her in the dress, she inserted the memory card into the computer. It contained only one file, a video of about 20 minutes. With her heart pounding, Ariane started it. On the screen, Eliza Sterling appeared, visibly distressed, recording herself in a location Ariane didn't recognize. "If you are seeing this, Eliza began, her voice trembling. "It means something has happened to me, and it probably means that you, whoever you are somehow under his control." Ariane felt a chill run down her spine. "My name is Eliza Sterling. Was Victor Sterling's wife, and I fear for my life. In the last 6 months, I have discovered things about my husband that make me believe he is capable of anything to maintain his power and control." Eliza then detailed her gradual discovery of the manor's surveillance system: hidden cameras in mirrors, microphones in decorative objects, tracking software on electronic devices. She explained how she realized her medication was being tampered with sedatives, and how she found blackmail files against politicians, businessmen, even judges. But the worst, Eliza continued, her face pale with fear, was finding out about the others. "You're probably one of them now. Vulnerable young women, usually from humble backgrounds, whom he transforms, molds, makes dependent. I was the first 15 years ago. Before me, there was an attempt with another girl who didn't survive the process." Ariane felt her stomach churn. "There's a pattern. He finds them, offers an opportunity they can't refuse, isolates them from the outside world, and then the transformation begins. Clothes, education, manners. He creates an idealized version of what he desires, and when they tire or try to escape..." Eliza swallowed hard. "I'm leaving this record because I know I'm close to that point. I meticulously planned my escape, but if you're seeing this, something went wrong, and now you need to know he won't stop. There is no love in his actions, only obsession and control, and when you cease to be useful or interesting, there will be another." The video ended with instructions on where to find the evidence Eliza had gathered: a hiding place in the house's foundation, accessible through a passage in the basement. Ariane closed the laptop with trembling hands. Her mind was buzzing with what she had just watched. Part of her wanted to deny, wanted to believe Eliza was delusional, paranoid. But another part, the part that had felt the gazes, that had noticed the inconsistencies, that had perceived the suffocating control, knew there was truth in that desperate testimony, and now she needed to decide what to do. Flee immediately, without a plan, without money, possibly pursued by a man with unlimited resources, or stay, pretend, gain Victor's absolute trust while seeking the evidence that would confirm or refute Eliza's accusations. There was a third option, one she barely dared to consider: the possibility that, despite everything, she had developed real feelings for Victor, complex, disturbing, perhaps even unhealthy feelings, but undeniably present. What if Eliza was wrong? What if redemption was possible for that man broken by grief? As she put away the laptop and memory card in an improvised hiding place, Ariane realized she was at a point of no return. Any choice she made now would define not only her future, but possibly her survival. The next day in piano class, her teacher noticed her distraction. "Is everything all right, Miss Sterling?" the elderly man asked, frowning when she missed the same note for the third time. "You seem preoccupied." Ariane forced a smile. "Just tired, Professor. I didn't sleep well." It wasn't a lie. She had spent the night awake, thinking, planning, weighing her options. When the sun rose, she had made a decision. She needed more information before acting. She needed to find the evidence Eliza had mentioned. After class, she went down to the basement with the excuse of looking for an old music score box. The manor's basement was a labyrinth of corridors, storage rooms, and machinery. Following the instructions from the video, she located a specific shelf that, when moved, revealed a small opening in the wall. The space beyond was cramped, dusty, clearly unvisited for years. Ariane crawled through the narrow tunnel until she reached a small chamber. There she found a locked metal box. The key, according to Eliza, was hidden inside the library piano, under a specific key, F-sharp, the note Victor never played because he said it brought bad luck. She replaced the shelf in its place and went upstairs to retrieve the key. The manor was silent that afternoon. Most of the staff took advantage of Victor's absence to perform tasks outside the estate. In the library, Ariane opened the piano lid and carefully removed the indicated key. Inside, as promised, was a small rusty key. She was about to return to the basement when her phone rang, startling her. It was Victor. "Hello," she answered, trying to sound casual. "How's the trip?" "I'm productive," he replied, his voice distant over the line. "And you, Ariane? How have you been spending your time in my absence?" There was something in the way he emphasized My absence that put her on alert. Normal. Lessons reading. Nothing special. Interesting, he commented, a strange note in his voice. Because I received a security system alert. The basement was accessed today. Any special reason for that? Ariane's heart raced, but she kept her voice controlled. Yes, I went to look for some old music scores the professor mentioned. They were stored down there. A heavy silence, I see. And did you find what you were looking for? Not yet. The professor wasn't very specific about where they would be. Another silence. I'll be back tomorrow morning, Ariane. Earlier than planned. I have a surprise for you. When she hung up, Ariane knew her time was running out. Whatever the surprise was, she didn't believe it would be anything good. She needed to act fast. She went down to the basement again, found the hiding place, and opened the box with the key. Inside, she found documents, photos, a hard drive, and more disturbingly, a medical diary detailing what appeared to be a long-term psychological experiment. The notes, written in Victor's own hand, described methods of conditioning, psychological manipulation, even dosages of substances to keep the subject receptive and dependent. There were photos, too, not just of Eliza, but of other women, 3 to be exact, all with an unsettling resemblance. Vulnerable-looking young women transformed through subtle surgeries, style changes, and, apparently, drugs, into versions of the same fantasy. And all had deceased in tragic circumstances, according to Victor's clinical notes. Ariane was not Eliza's first substitute. She was the 4th in a macabre series. As she absorbed the horror of these discoveries, she heard a noise, footsteps in the basement corridor. Quickly, she put everything back in the box except the hard drive, which she hid inside her blouse. She pushed the box back into its hiding place, closed the passage, and went out into the corridor, trying to appear casual. It was Arthur, the butler, carrying some boxes. "Miss Ariane," he said, surprised. "What are you doing down here again?" "Still looking for those music scores," she replied, forcing a smile. "I guess they're not here after all." Arthur studied her for a moment, his aged eyes scrutinizing her face. Mr. Victor called. "He's returning early tomorrow." "Yes," he informed me. "He asked me to prepare the blue room." The blue room. Ariane had never entered it, but she knew it was in the most isolated wing of the manor. It was a suite used only for very special guests. "Are we expecting a visitor?" she asked, trying to sound casually interested. "A doctor," Arthur replied, his face impassive. "Dr. Lawrence." Ariane didn't know the name, but something in the way Arthur pronounced it sent a shiver down her spine. "Any health problems?" The butler hesitated, as if deciding how much he could reveal. "Dr. Lawrence specializes in alternative treatments for behavioral issues." At that moment, Ariane knew the doctor wasn't coming to treat Victor. He was coming for her. She had less than 24 hours to escape Stirlingwood Manor, or face a fate similar to Eliza's and the others before her. But Victor had underestimated something important. By transforming her, by educating her, by giving her access to his world, he had also given her the tools for her own liberation. And perhaps more importantly, by letting her intertwine with Eliza's memory, he had allowed something stronger than fear to grow within her. The determination not to become just another ghost in the corridors of that manor. What Victor didn't know was that Ariane had a plan, one that had begun to form in her mind since the night of the ball, when Celeste Miller had discreetly slipped not only a business card into her bag, but also a key that would open not just a door, but a future different from the one Victor had planned for her. Night fell over Stirlingwood Manor, bringing with it shadows that danced on the walls like restless ghosts. Ariane observed the London sky from her room, the city lights twinkling in the distance, a reminder of the world beyond those stone walls and secrets. Eliza's hard drive was hidden inside a fake jewelry box under a loose floorboard in the closet. She wasn't sure if it was a safe spot, but it was the best she could improvise with the scarce time she had. Her plan needed to be executed flawlessly, as she knew there would be no second chance. Victor's early return and the arrival of this mysterious Dr. Lawrence only confirmed her suspicions. She was about to be adjusted, like the others before her. Perhaps a treatment that would make her more docile, more pliable. Perhaps something worse. She needed to act that night while she was still lucid and free. The key Celeste Miller had given her at the ball opened an apartment in Notting Hill, a safe place according to the note that accompanied the key. But she couldn't simply walk out the front door. The manor had 24-hour security, and even if she managed to get out, Victor would find her within hours with his resources and connections. She needed a distraction, a more elaborate plan. And more importantly, she needed concrete evidence to ensure Victor could never do that to another woman again. At 9 o'clock that night, Ariane went down for the dinner Arthur had prepared. As always, she dined alone at the immense dining table, served with the same formality as if Victor were present. As she ate, she observed the butler with new eyes. "Arthur," she called, keeping her voice calm, "how long have you worked for the Sterling family?" The elderly man looked at her with an impassive expression. 42 years, miss. I served Mr. Victor's father before him." "And you knew all his wives?" A brief flash of something, alarm, sadness, passed through the butler's eyes. "Mr. Victor was only married to Mrs. Eliza, miss." "I see," Ariane replied, cutting a piece of steak. "And the other women who lived in this house? The ones who came before me after Eliza?" Arthur became completely still, the water pitcher frozen in midair. "I don't know what you're talking about, miss." "I think you do, Arthur. Just as you knew about Dr. Lawrence, just as you know about the cameras, the medication, everything." The butler placed the pitcher on the table carefully, his hands slightly trembling. "I have served this family for almost half a century, Miss Ariane. My loyalty is unquestionable. Even when that loyalty means being complicit in something terrible?" Arthur looked around nervously, aware of the hidden cameras. "You shouldn't talk about these things, miss. It's not safe." "For whom, Arthur? For me or for you?" For the first time since she had known him, Ariane saw the butler's mask of professional subservience cracked, revealing an old, frightened man underneath. "The walls have ears, Miss Ariane, and Mr. Victor has eyes everywhere. If you'll excuse me." He hurried away, leaving Ariane alone with her thoughts and the growing certainty that her life depended on what she would do in the next few hours. After dinner, she retired to her room as expected. She put on her pajamas, brushed her teeth, followed the entire routine she knew was being monitored. Then she lay down on the bed with a book, as she did every night. But this time, instead of reading, she was planning every step of her escape. At 11:30, when the majority of the staff had already retired, and only the night security guard remained awake, making his rounds on the perimeter of the property, Ariane put her plan into action. First, she changed her clothes, not the elegant clothes Victor had given her, but simple clothes she had saved from her previous life. She retrieved the hard drive from its hiding place and the memory card with Eliza's video. Then, cautiously, she made her way to Eliza's closet. She knew this particular room had less surveillance. Victor considered it almost sacred, a sanctuary where privacy was more important than control. There she went to the jewelry section and selected some valuable pieces, not to steal but to use as part of her plan. With the jewelry in a small bag, she went to the kitchen. This would be the riskiest part. She needed to leave the house undetected, and the only exit that had no alarms or cameras was through the pantry, which led to a service door used for grocery deliveries. The kitchen was dark and silent. Ariane moved carefully, trying not to make a sound. She had almost reached the pantry door when a voice startled her. "I wondered when you'd try." Ariane froze. Arthur was sitting at the kitchen table, almost invisible in the gloom. He didn't seem surprised. "Arthur, she began, but the butler interrupted her with a gesture. "No need to explain. I've seen this film before, 3 times to be exact." Slowly he rose and lit a small lamp on the table, revealing his tired, aged face. "You're smarter than the others," he continued. "You found out faster, planned better, but the outcome would be the same. So you know. About the other women, it wasn't a question. Claudia, 2015, a tragic riding accident at the family stables. Then Mariana, 2018, a medication overdose. And Juliana, 2020, suicide after severe depression. He recited the names and dates like a familiar obituary. And, of course, Mrs. Eliza herself, 2022. Ariane felt a shiver run down her spine. "Why are you telling me this? Are you going to stop me?" Arthur sighed, a heavy sound of resignation. "No, miss, I won't stop you. I'll help you." He walked to the pantry and opened the door, revealing the service exit. "Why?" Ariane asked, suspicious. "Why now?" "Because I'm too old to carry more guilt," he replied, avoiding her gaze. "And because you remind me of my daughter. She would be your age now if she were alive." Arthur handed Ariane a key. "This opens the back gate. The guard will be on his rounds on the north side of the property for another 7 minutes. You'll have to be quick and quiet." Ariane hesitated, still suspicious. "How do I know it's not a trap?" "You don't," he replied simply. "But if you stay, you're certain of what will happen. If you go, you have a chance." It was a gamble she had to take. She nodded and took the key. "There's one more thing I need to do before I go," she said, determined. "I need evidence, something that ensures he won't come after me." Arthur seemed to understand immediately. "In the library behind the Sterling family portrait, there's a safe. The combination is his birth date, reversed. Inside you'll find what you're looking for." "Why are you really helping me?" Ariane asked, still uncertain about trusting him. The old butler finally looked her in the eyes. "Because I've watched this film too many times, miss, and it always ends the same way, with a dead woman and a funeral where I pretend not to know the truth." Before leaving, Ariane made a quick detour through the library. Following Arthur's instructions, she found the safe and opened it. Inside, there were folders with documents detailing a network of corruption, blackmail, and financial crimes that extended to the highest echelons of government. There was also a bottle of pills with a handwritten label, Ariane Daily Dose. She stored everything in her bag, along with the hard drive and memory card. Minutes later, she was outside the property, running through the tree-lined streets of Kensington towards a main avenue, where she could catch a taxi. Adrenaline coursed through her veins, mixed with fear and a strange sense of liberation. The taxi dropped her off at a discreet building in Notting Hill. The key Celeste had given her opened the door to an apartment on the 4th floor, a small but cozy space, clearly maintained for emergencies like that. On the kitchen table, she found an envelope with her name. Inside, a brief letter. "If you are reading this, you made the right decision. There are clothes in the closet, money in the false bottom of the dresser drawer, and a prepaid phone on the bedside table. My number is in its memory. Call when you are ready for the next step. Until then, rest and know you are safe here. Zaim." For the first time in months, Ariane allowed herself to cry, not from fear or sadness, but from relief. She was out of the manor, away from Victor and his suffocating control. But she knew she wasn't truly free, not yet. A man with Victor Sterling's resources and connections would find her eventually, unless she had more permanent protection. The evidence she had collected was her only guarantee of safety. That night, she slept a restless sleep, waking at every sound, every shadow. When morning finally came, she picked up the phone Celeste had left and dialed the only saved number. "You did it," the psychiatrist said when she answered. "No identification needed." "I was worried." "I have evidence," Ariane replied without preamble. "Documents, videos, a hard drive full of information. About Eliza, about the other women, about his illegal dealings. That's more than we expected. Keep them safe. It's not safe to meet yet. He must already know you've fled. What do I do now?" "Wait, don't leave the apartment. I'll arrange for someone to bring groceries. In 2 days we'll meet and decide the next steps." Ariane hung up, feeling simultaneously empowered and vulnerable. She had the tools to destroy Victor Sterling, but he had the power and resources to destroy her first if he found her. The next hours passed with a torturous slowness. Ariane repeatedly examined the documents and evidence she had collected, trying to fully comprehend the man she had been living with. What she discovered horrified her even more, a network of manipulation that extended far beyond the manor walls, reaching courts, police stations, even the media. It wouldn't be easy to expose someone with so many connections. In the late afternoon, she received a grocery delivery, as Celeste had promised. But along with the food came a newspaper, and on the front page, a headline that made her freeze. "Victor Sterling hospitalized after suicide attempt." According to the report, the businessman had been found unconscious in his manor by the butler after ingesting an excessive amount of medication mixed with alcohol. He was in serious but stable condition. The article vaguely mentioned personal problems and unresolved grief as possible motivations. The phone rang immediately. "Did you see the news?" Celeste asked without preamble. Yes, do you think that it's a trap, the psychiatrist cut in. A way to make you come out of hiding. He knows you care despite everything. Ariane felt a pang in her chest. It was true. Despite everything she had discovered, despite the fear and manipulation, a part of her still cared about Victor. This was the deepest manipulation of all. He had made her develop real feelings for her captor. I won't leave here, she stated, trying to sound more convinced than she felt. Good, there's been a change of plans. It's not safe for us to wait 2 days. A car will pick you up tonight at 9. Bring only the essentials and the evidence. At 9 o'clock sharp, a discreet black car parked in front of the building. The driver, a serious-looking man who introduced himself only as Paul, drove Ariane to an isolated house on the outskirts of the city. Celeste was waiting at the door. The house was spacious and well protected, with a security system that seemed almost military. Inside, Ariane discovered she wasn't alone. There were 2 other women, both with stories similar to hers. Marina worked at the psychiatric clinic where Victor briefly admitted Mariana. The second substitute, Celeste explained, introducing them. And Clara is Juliana's sister, the third. The 3 women studied each other, recognizing in the others the same mixture of trauma and determination they felt in themselves. For years, I've been collecting evidence against Victor, Celeste continued, guiding them to a room that looked like an operations center, with computers, files, and maps on the walls. I first knew Eliza professionally. Then we became friends. She trusted me, shared her fears. When she died, I promised myself I wouldn't let it happen again. Why didn't you report him before? Ariane asked. I tried, Celeste replied, her face hardening. I went to the police, to prosecutors, to journalists. But his power is extensive. Without concrete evidence, it was just the word of an obsessed psychiatrist against a respected grieving businessman. And now we have evidence, Ariane said, placing her bag on the table. The next hours were dedicated to meticulously analyzing each document, video, and file. The evidence, when combined, formed a devastating picture. Victor was not just an obsessive controller, but a systematic predator, a manipulator, who used his money and influence to create and then destroy vulnerable women. We need to take this to the federal police, Marina said, horrified. Bypass the local authorities he controls. It won't be enough, Clara replied bitterly. He has connections at all levels. We need something more definitive. The media, Ariane suggested. Not just one newspaper or one broadcaster, but all of them simultaneously. An exposure so public and comprehensive that he can't suppress it. Celeste nodded slowly. I have some reliable contacts. Journalists who don't easily bend to pressure. But even so, it would be risky. He would come after us with everything he has. He's already coming, Ariane argued. The only difference is whether we face him on our terms or his. That night, while the others slept, Ariane remained awake, thinking. Something was bothering her, a piece of the puzzle that still didn't fit. She went back to the safe documents, analyzing them once more. Among the papers, she found something she hadn't noticed before, a medical document dated 6 years ago. It was a detailed psychiatric report about Victor, signed by a doctor named Richard Newman. The diagnosis was clear: narcissistic personality disorder with psychopathic traits. But the most shocking was the context. The report had been requested by Eliza 2 years before her death. She already suspected, already sought to understand the man she had married. And more importantly, the doctor had recommended intensive treatment, warning that without it, Victor's behavior could become progressively more destructive. Ariane felt a sudden and disturbing realization. Victor was sick, deeply sick. Dangerous, yes, but also fundamentally broken. This didn't absolve him of his crimes, but it offered a perspective that complicated the simple narrative of monster versus victims. The next morning, she shared her discovery with the others. Does this change anything? Clara asked, skeptical. He still destroyed lives. He still killed my sister. It doesn't change what he did, Ariane replied, but it changes how we should approach him. A direct public confrontation could drive him to even more dangerous extremes. What do you suggest then? Celeste asked. A meeting, him and me. Her final confrontation, but on my terms. The idea was met with vehement protests, but Ariane was determined. He wants me back. He's obsessed with me, as he was with Eliza and the others. If I offer that, he'll drop his guard. And then we'll have our chance. Against all objections, Ariane elaborated her plan. She would write a letter to Victor, proposing a meeting at the same spot where Eliza had died, the curve of the road in the Lake District. She would go alone but not unprotected. Celeste and the others would be hidden nearby, along with reliable journalists equipped with cameras and recorders, ready to intervene and document everything. It's madness, Celeste said when Ariane finished explaining. He's unpredictable, dangerous. It's the only way, Ariane insisted. He needs to see me, hear my voice, look into my eyes when I confront him. He needs to know he no longer has power over me. The letter was sent that same day. The response came in less than 2 hours. A simple, "I'll be there alone." The night before the meeting, Ariane couldn't sleep. She thought about everything that had happened since she first entered Stirlingwood Manor as an invisible young woman trying to go unnoticed. How she had transformed, not just externally but in her essence. How she had learned to see herself through Victor's eyes, first as a substitute, then as her own strong, capable person. When morning came, she dressed carefully. Not in the elegant clothes Victor had given her, nor in the simple clothes of her previous life. She chose something in between, a white cotton blouse, well-cut jeans, comfortable flats. Her own style, discovered through trial and error. She tied her hair in a low ponytail, wore minimal makeup. She wanted Victor to see her as she really was, not his creation, not a fantasy, but a real woman. The meeting place was a winding curve on the road that snaked through the Lake District. It was an isolated spot, with a spectacular view of Brighton Bay in the distance. There, 2 years earlier, Eliza's car had gone off the road, plunging 100 meters down the steep embankment. Ariane arrived first, in a car driven by Paul. As planned, he would drive away, but remain within reach of a phone call. Celeste and the others would be hidden nearby, along with 3 investigative journalists equipped with cameras and recorders. At 10 o'clock sharp, Victor's silver Porsche, the same model Eliza had died in, meticulously rebuilt, appeared on the road's curve. He parked a few meters away and slowly got out of the car. He was different from when Ariane had last seen him, thinner with deep circles under his eyes, unshaven. But his eyes retained that familiar intensity, that hypnotic power that had both attracted and terrified her. "You came," he said, his voice hoarse, as if he hadn't spoken for days. "I thought it was a trick. I'm not like you, Victor. I don't lie about important things." He smiled, a sad, knowing smile. "Everyone lies, Ariane, especially about important things." He took a step towards her, but Ariane raised her hand, keeping her distance. "Don't come closer. I'm here to talk, not to come back." "Then why are you here? Why didn't you simply vanish with what you stole from me?" "I didn't steal anything that was truly yours," she replied. "I just recovered the truth you tried to bury." Victor let out a bitter laugh. "The truth. Everyone seeks it, but no one truly wants it. It's ugly, painful. You'd prefer to continue in our little shared fantasy, wouldn't you? A fantasy where you transformed me into a substitute for your dead wife. Where you drugged and manipulated me. Where you planned to eliminate me when you tired of me, as you did with the others." He didn't deny it. He just watched her with those penetrating eyes. "I loved you, you know. Not like I loved Eliza or the others. In a different way. You were special." "It wasn't love," Ariane retorted, feeling the anger grow within her. "It was obsession, control. I was a toy to you, a living doll to mold and manipulate." "And what did you feel for me?" he asked, ignoring the accusation. "Was it also just manipulation? Or was there something real there, buried under all the fear and resentment?" The question hit Ariane like a physical blow. It was the question she had avoided confronting, even with herself. "There were moments," she admitted finally, "when I thought I could love you. When I wished everything was different, that you were just a man and I just a woman without all the rest." "It can still be that way," he said, taking another step towards her. "We can start over. No secrets, no manipulations, just us two." For a brief moment, Ariane felt that old attraction, that vulnerability to his magnetic presence. But then she remembered the photos of the other women, the medical records, the pain and fear in Eliza's eyes in the video. "No," she said firmly. "It's past that point. You need help, Victor. Treatment, and you need to answer for what you've done. His expression hardened. Answer for what exactly? For loving too much? For wanting to preserve Eliza's memory? For manipulating vulnerable women? For drugging them? For killing them? The last word hung between them like a physical accusation. I never killed anyone, he said, his voice low, dangerous. The accidents happened. The overdoses were self-inflicted. The suicides were personal choices. Choices you carefully orchestrated, situations you created. Victor shrugged, a strangely casual gesture for the gravity of the conversation. Prove it. It's your word against mine. And who will believe you, a former domestic worker, uneducated, without connections? It's not just my word anymore, Ariane replied, keeping her voice calm despite her racing heart. I have evidence, Victor. Documents, videos, witnesses. I know about your illegal dealings, your blackmail, your bribes. I know about the Manor's surveillance system, about the medication you put in my food. For the first time, she saw a spark of fear in his eyes. What do you want from me? He asked, his arrogance replaced by calculated caution. I want you to confess. Here now. Record a video admitting everything. Then you'll voluntarily admit yourself to a psychiatric clinic for long-term treatment. And you'll transfer a significant amount to a fund that will help the families of your victims. Victor stared at her for a long moment, then let out a laugh of genuine surprise. Do you really think that will work? That I'll just confess, admit myself, and give up my fortune? Yes, Ariane replied with a confidence she didn't know she possessed. Because the alternative is for everything to go public. Every sordid detail exposed, your reputation destroyed, your company in ruins, and you imprisoned, not in a comfortable clinic but in a penitentiary where men like you don't last long. She took a step towards him, inverting the dynamic. It's your choice, Victor, redemption or destruction, but one way or another this ends today. Something changed in his gaze, a realization that he was cornered. But instead of surrendering, Victor did something unexpected. He smiled, a genuine, almost admiring smile. You learned well, he said, his voice soft. Better than the others. Better even than Eliza. Then, with a sudden movement, he took something from the inner pocket of his jacket. Ariane recoiled, startled, expecting a weapon. But what he held was a small remote control. Do you know what this is? He asked, his thumb caressing the device's single button. It's a detonator. Simple, effective. Right now there are explosives installed in the car that brought you here, in Celeste Miller's apartment, and in the house where you and your new friends were hiding. Ariane felt her blood run cold. You're bluffing. Do you really think I would come unarmed to this meeting? That I wouldn't anticipate your betrayal? He shook his head, like a professor disappointed with a promising student. I've always been one step ahead, Ariane. Always. Fear threatened to paralyze her, but Ariane fought against it. She couldn't show weakness, not now. If you press that button, she said, forcing herself to keep her voice firm, you'll only prove you're exactly the monster everyone thinks you are, and it won't save your reputation, your freedom, or your legacy. Perhaps I don't care about those things anymore, he replied, his eyes fixed on hers. Perhaps I only care that you learn to defy me, and need to learn the consequences. His finger hovered over the button. Ariane held her breath. It was at that moment that they heard the sound of approaching engines and sirens. Lights flashed between the trees. Voices called out through a megaphone. The federal police had arrived. What did you do? Hissed Victor, his face contorted with fury. Nothing, Ariane replied, as surprised as he was. That wasn't part of the plan. As patrol cars surrounded the area and armed agents advanced towards them, Ariane saw Celeste emerging from her hiding place, accompanied by a tall man in a suit whom she recognized from newspaper photos, the director of the federal police. It's over, Victor, Celeste said, approaching. Hand over the detonator. It's useless. We've already deactivated the explosives. Victor looked around like a cornered animal. His eyes turned to Ariane, filled with an emotion she couldn't name. Anger, yes, but also something deeper, more complex. Did you really think you would beat me at my own game? He asked, his voice almost gentle now. Before Ariane could answer, he made a sudden move, not to press the detonator but to throw it away. Then, in a single fluid motion, he advanced to the edge of the precipice. Victor, no! Ariane cried, realizing his intention. He looked at her one last time, a strange and serene smile on his face. "You were the only one who could have saved me," he said. "But in the end you chose to save yourself. I'm almost proud." And then, before anyone could reach him, he took a deliberate step backward, falling into the same abyss that had claimed Eliza years before. Ariane's scream caught in her throat. The agents rushed to the edge, but everyone knew. No one could survive a fall from that height. In the confused hours that followed, Ariane discovered the rest of the story. Celeste hadn't entirely trusted the confrontation plan. Secretly, she had contacted a federal prosecutor with whom she maintained professional relations, handing over copies of some of the evidence. The prosecutor, in turn, had obtained an arrest warrant for Victor and mobilized an operation to capture him during the meeting. The explosives were real, but had been detected and deactivated by a team of specialists. Victor was, in fact, cornered. His only way out was the one he had chosen. 6 months later, Ariane looked out the window of her new apartment in Bristol, a city where no one knew her, where she could start anew without the weight of the past. The Sterling case had become a national scandal. Corruption, manipulation, psychological abuse, suspicious deaths. Even without a formal trial, the truth had finally come to light. Stirlingwood Manor had been converted into a support center for women victims of violence, funded by the fortune Victor had left behind. The families of Claudia, Mariana, and Juliana had received financial compensation, though no money could bring their daughters back. As for Ariane, she was slowly rebuilding her life. She had used part of the money she had received to send her mother for specialized treatment in the United States, with good prospects of recovery. She had enrolled in university, studying psychology, an interest born from her own traumatic experience. Celeste had become a close friend, a mentor. Sometimes they spoke about Victor, trying to understand the complexity of that man who had united them through such tragic circumstances. "Do you think he truly loved me?" Ariane asked in one of those conversations. "In his own twisted and unhealthy way. I don't think he knew how to love," Celeste replied. "He only knew how to possess, to control. But with you, perhaps he came as close as he could to true love." Ariane contemplated this idea as she watched the sunset color the Bristol sky in shades of orange and red. Sometimes she still dreamed of Stirlingwood Manor, with its silent corridors and dark secrets. Sometimes she woke up calling for Victor, a call that was simultaneously desire and terror. Time would heal those wounds, Celeste had assured her. With therapy, support, and the passage of years, the memories would lose their power over her. One day, perhaps, she would be able to think of that period without pain, without fear. For now, she contented herself with hard-won freedom, with the possibility of choosing her own path, defining her own identity, of being seen not as a reflection of someone else's desires, but as herself, complex, imperfect, resilient. On the table next to the window, there was a small vase with white orchids, the flowers Eliza had loved so much. Ariane kept them as a reminder, not of the horror she had lived through, but of the strength she had discovered within herself, of the invisible woman who had learned to take up space, to make herself heard, to fight for her own story. And if sometimes she still felt a strange emptiness when thinking of Victor, an echo of the intense and tortured connection they shared, she kept that feeling to herself. Some complexities of the human heart were too difficult to explain, even for those who dedicated their lives to comprehending them. At night, before sleeping, Ariane often opened the window and looked at the stars, feeling the warm southern wind on her face. In some moments of weakness, she imagined she could still feel his presence, not as a threat, but as a familiar shadow, a part of her past that had shaped her, for better or worse. "Goodbye, Victor," she whispered to the night, knowing she needed to let him go to truly free herself. And then she closed the window